League of Legends is a very competitive game. Competitive games often have rather strict metas, stuff you should do, ways you should play in order to reach the maximum efficiency of winning. Anyone who doesn't adhere to the meta will promptly be detrousered and flayed upon the buttocks. In today's video, I want to show you 9 ways to sort of break that meta without actually trolling and still being useful and strong. Basically, weird, fun builds that work. Now, my dad always says the best way to start is either at the beginning or the place that you can collect your 10p Tesco discount vouchers without having to spend more than £5 per voucher. But we're nowhere near a Tesco's right now, so we'll just start at the beginning. Kai'Sa, the newest champion to the league. Pretty strong overall now, I would say, mostly favouring that AD build for the high burst. This variation of Kai'Sa has been practiced in solo queue, made appearance in the pro leagues, but we don't want to do AD Kai'Sa. In fact, we don't want to do marksman Kai'Sa at all. Our first build today is AP Kai'Sa jungle. AP Kai'Sa is good at poking and is fully capable of comboing people with her evolved W and passive. So here's your build. You basically just want a bunch of AP on her since she has good ratios. Sprinkle that in with some CDR to help cover the fact you only really have one main damage ability. So we're going to chuck in Nash's Tooth because as jungle, you need a bit more help to clear the camps and to fend off pesky enemy junglers. Electrocute is sitting pretty here so you can proper one-pop enemy squishies and to complement your more bursty approach to the jungle ganks. You'll need to be a bit careful in the early game as you won't really be able to match most enemy junglers in raw power, but once you get your runic echoes and especially that Nash's, you should be good to go. Run around firing a W down lanes and watch the sparks fly. Next, we're going to look at something we've been seeing a bit more of on the Korean servers thanks to the minion goal changes in the recent patch. Cannon minions are worth a shite ton nowadays and tank junglers are swooping in with this build to reap the benefits. But how do you pinch that valuable cannon from your laner without making them call you every obscenity under the sun and going in spawn to AFK? The answer is Targons. The support item that allows you to tax minions is really good for sharing that cannon minion wealth. But of course, it goes deeper than that. Because once you complete its quest, you gain access to the Sight Stone reward. And because the green smite doesn't exist anymore, tank junglers who previously really loved that shit are now left a little bit missing out. And since they aren't looking to specifically dominate the enemies right from the get-go, it's cool if they set themselves a little bit behind early to pick that reward later on. This build is basically just any tank jungler with a relic shield, share the cannon minion, get the sight stone. It's not quite that unique, wacky full deal that the rest of these builds will be in this video, so I'm not going to go into too much more detail, but it's interesting nonetheless. For your third build, and one that's quite close to my heart, AP Blitzcrank. If you ever play bot lane with your girlfriend, you'll know the full terror that is Blitzcrank. Now imagine if you could not only grab his hapless victims, but also one-pop them in the process. Blitzcrank has 100% high AP scalings on both his Q and his ultimate, giving him wacky burst and a natural Lichbane synergy in his E. Here's a build if you're gonna go support. You can do it mid lane too. I prefer this from support because it's easier to get kills, and Blitz has no real reliable ranged wave clear, which is what you often need from your mid laner. AP Blitzcrank excels versus squishy supports like Bran, Nami, Soraka, basically most ranged supports. You want to be careful of team comps with lots of tanks on them because you can't burst tanks, and an AP Blitzcrank that can't burst is not a very happy or useful Blitzcrank. If you're into bonking, then you might be on the wrong kind of tube. But while you're here, what about the bonking Gragas build? This build plays around your drunken rage and short burst combos. Unlike full AP Gragas, this build still leaves you tanky and is a perfectly viable way to play Gragas jungle, with the focus being on your bonking and not your barrels. There are 3 main components to this build: your runes, your skill order, and of course, your items. For runes, you want Electrocute and Sudden Impact. Electrocute pops off of your Bonk combo, which is E into W, as your W counts as 2 instances of damage. And the Sudden Impact rune gives you a bunch of penetration when you throw your belly at the enemy. For skill order, opting into E max gives you a much higher burst than Q max, while also reducing its cooldown. That last part is a pretty big deal since your belly sets up your entire Bonk combo. It does make your jungle clears a bit weaker, however. There are two major items you want to look at to be a true bonking Gragas: Runic Echoes and Iceborne Gauntlet. Runic Echoes isn't as trolly as it sounds on Gragas. Right up until he got nerfed 1,000 million times in a row, it was actually pretty standard over Cinderhulk, so it still holds its merit, and Iceborne is a decent hybrid tank damage item. Most importantly for this build, it's got the sheen factor, which is really nice for delivering a juicy, big old bonk. After those two items, you can just go full tank. The biggest downside to this build is the vulnerability to magic damage until at least your third item. You're basically naked against mages because you've got 0 health and 0 magic resist. To this end, this build works better versus heavy AD comps, but it can still work if you get something like a Spirit Visage third item. If you're less into bonking but more into speeding, perhaps Lethality Hecarim will be the build for you. Hecarim is a little less popular now than he used to be a few seasons ago, but he's still pretty good at being a fast-moving carry's nightmare. This variation of Hecarim puts all your eggs in the deleting basket. Not so good at engaging team fights or absorbing pressure from the enemy team, but very good at mowing down enemy squishies. This build starts off in the same way a standard Hecarim build does: Talisman into Triforce. And whereas at this point with standard Hecarim you start getting tanky, this is where you get your Yumus. Thanks to Hecarim's passive, you get a bunch of free extra AD when you rev up your engine. And thanks to this, Yumus not only gives you a huge chunk of damage from its raw stats, but also through that move speed active. Not to mention how nicely that enables you to swoop in onto your opponent. After Yumus, you can either get Duskblade or Edge of Night. Traditionally, Duskblade has been the better choice as it's a good overall assassin item, but since its nerfs, I think the Edge of Night actually has a strong case for being a viable alternative thanks to the spell shield that it gives you. Something that will make it easier for you to stampede onto targets without getting immediately peeled away or burst down. And anytime you're a squishy assassin, avoiding CC and death happens to be a pretty good strategy. Now let's move on to something a bit more stacky. Do you guys like stacks? I hope so. And at least if you do, you'll love this build. If you don't like stacking, then well, this won't be for you, but I'm going to tell you it anyway. This one's all about chilling out and stacking up with jungle Nasus. Nasus himself is obviously very stack heavy. You sit in top lane, you farm up your Q until either you turn into this unstoppable monster, or your team just loses the game before you can. Well, this is a bit like that, except like I said, this is jungle and not top lane. And we're upping the stacks this time by including Dark Harvest. So you can be stacking your stacks while you stack your stacks. The build is somewhat similar to that Hecarim build I mentioned. Start with a machete this time, not talisman, and the refillable, then rush your Triforce, and then go Blue Smite into tanky. You can get Cinderhulk if you're feeling it right there, but you can just go for more standard Nasus items like Frozen Heart if you want more CDR. It's pretty much up to you. Extra CDR will make you stack faster, but it's not worth going into a suboptimal build for. The aim of the game, as you might have guessed, is to stack like your life depends on it. Which it sort of does, I guess, because the more you stack, the more likely you'll win. Either way, last hit with Q, farm up like a madman, get those cheeky kills where you can, and then turn into a beast when the time is right. If you really want to go at it, you can also use Targons, like we touched on in the earlier build in this video, to tax those cannon minions. Not only do you get that juicy gold and experience, but you'll get extra stacks for killing the caddies, so it's a double whammy of benefits. And when you reach late game, you're stacked to high heaven, so you can run around at the enemy team and delete squishies off the map, or you can just split push and become more of an unstoppable home wrecker than a young blonde with fresh implants. Before we move on to the next build, guys, I just want to thank you real quick for watching the video so far. If you're enjoying it, you can leave a like, and if you want to see more, of course, you can always subscribe. Sometimes my dog makes appearances in my videos, so I'd say it's pretty worth it. But anyway, next up, have you ever wanted to yell something at someone and have it hurt them without child services banging down on your door? Then AP Rengar is your boy. Rengar is known for his ability to destroy carries, delete them from the map with relative ease. Really annoying to deal with from behind and always a threat to the squishies as the game goes on. Surprisingly, AP Rengar is much of the same, despite being pretty much nothing of the same, at least in the way you build him, if you get me. Alright, so Rengar's Ferocious Roar, his W, has an 80% AP scaling, which is pretty decent for an AoE ability that you can use 2 of at max ferocity. But the core of this build isn't just about his W. Here's your rune page and your item build. As you can see, a decent amount of your damage, especially early, comes from the Gunblade, so you can sort of play like a standard Rengar for the beginning of the game, but after that you start delving more into the AP territory, but you can absolutely still one-shot people. When you're playing the lane phase, make sure you're dipping in and out of the bushes to pounce on minions with Q to last hit them and stack your ferocity. Once you reach 3 ferocity, you can leap out onto your opponent laner and activate that W twice for crazy insta damage. Outside of laning, your ultimate combo is similar to a standard Rengar, except you want to obviously empower your W instead of your Q and throw in a Gunblade active somewhere in there. So the combo goes ultimate into leap into E while you're in the mid-air, Q onto the target, W, W, Gunblade. The big downside to this build compared to an AD Rengar is that you're much weaker in extended fights as you lack that same auto attack punch. It's also not advised to play in the jungle, but you can probably make it work in some way, shape or form. Just don't blame me if you int. And for our penultimate build today, I'd like to show you something that I like to call Adderall Aatrox. Consider this build a warning if you're ever considering doing more Adderall than you should. Unlike the more common Aatrox builds that involve Ramnus Hydra and the like, we're going to focus on making those arms look like Sanic. Triforce into Ginzu's is your core build. The Triforce gives you good overall stats, facilitating both sustained damage and burst, and if you think that the mana is useless, you would be mistaken. Being able to build a stat that is entirely unusable on your character is a vicarious display of dominance on the Rift. Not to mention, Triforce also gives you 20% CDR, which is honestly really ridiculous for someone like Aatrox who has no mana, no energy, and is purely limited by their cooldowns. Ginzu's hardly needs explaining, but once you ramp that bad boy up, you turn into a real monster. Getting the on-hit skip transcends your W into either this hyper-inflated wrecking ball or mega sustaining healing device. When running Conqueror, you also turn that into a huge amount of true damage, which will obliterate tanks like they're a tired whoopee cushion under your rotund Aunt Beatrice's fat ass. With this build, you do have to be careful of grouping up and team fighting, however, as when facing any sizable amount of CC, you will tend to get locked down before you can get ramping up and push out that damage. It's better to either split push or come in as a mop up or flanking secondary engage. Anytime a decent amount of focus is put onto you, you will be in trouble. And for the last build of today, a bit similar to our last one, it's on hit Bard. For me, this is one of those builds that looks like it's going to be absolute wank until someone pulls it out of the bag and dumps all over you with it. The core concept of this build is, as the name would suggest, attack speed and on hit. The reason it works so well is because of Bard's passive, Traveler's Call. Essentially, his meeps. By collecting these little dickheads around the map, his auto attacks get a decent whack of bonus damage, including a slow and splash. Considering these meeps increase in damage as you collect them, and with your AP, you can imagine how painful they can become as the game goes on. Then imagine whipping several of them out in a short space of time with nutty attack speed, and then imagine all of that being piled on top of already existing on-hit damage. You can sort of see how this damage easily starts getting pretty out of hand. Your build is Nash's Tooth, Ginzu's Wit's End. After that, it's probably better to go AP instead of more attack speed, since you're already attacking pretty ridiculously fast, and may as well start packing more of a punch on your hits with your meeps and your Q. But you can play around and see what you prefer doing. And for your builds, I recommend Electrocute for that sweet burst when you combo people. You only need to auto attack someone once and then Q them to activate it, which is good for lane phase trades and for trying to hard pop someone. Either way, I think that's all we're going to tell you guys today. I'm sure there are more secrets to be told, but for now, we've had enough. Thanks so much for watching the video, guys. Like I say, you can thumbs up it if you liked it and subscribe to me if you want to see more. Go follow me on my Twitch stream and go follow me on Twitter as well. Both of those are under the... They're not under the stream, they're under the video. Go click them if you want to go follow me. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you in my next video.